In one of the most closely watched electoral races on the continent, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta faces off against longtime rival Raila Odinga. New York crushes millions of dollars worth of illegal ivory seized in undercover operations. And could an international housing trend help ease the pressures of Europe's refugee crisis? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui at in for Vincent Makori, who will join us shortly from Nairobi. This is Africa 54. This evening we begin in West Africa, where authorities say 11 people were killed and 18 others critically wounded in a church attack in southeastern Nigeria. Initially, witnesses said the attack was carried out by at least 2 gunmen, but the police commissioner of Anambra State says only 1 gunman attacked St. Philip Catholic Church early Sunday. The Anambra State governor says the attack stemmed from a feud between members of the local community who were living outside Nigeria. Southeastern Nigeria is predominantly Christian, and the attack is a rare act of violence at a church. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but police say they do not believe Boko Haram militants were behind it. Across the continent, Al-Shabaab militants have shot and killed a provincial governor and his brother in Somalia. They were visiting relatives in Mogadishu when gunmen who trailed them opened fire. The Saturday incident occurred less than 3 hours after their car packed with explosives blew up in the center of the capital, killing at least 2 civilians and wounding 5 other people. The explosion came several hours after the U.S. military confirmed that a recent airstrike had killed a high-level Al-Shabaab commander linked to deadly attacks in Mogadishu. It was the second time in a week that deadly blast has rocked the capital's center city. Al-Shabaab, which is allied with Al-Qaeda, often targets Mogadishu with deadly attacks in high-profile areas such as hotels and military checkpoints. The terrorist group has been fighting since 2006 to overthrow the Somali government and turn the country into a strict Islamic state. Neighboring Kenya has one of the most closely watched presidential races in Africa, as incumbent Uhuru Kenyatta faces off Tuesday against longtime rival Raila Odinga. The killing of a key election official just days before the vote has elevated concerns after a contentious campaign period. VOA's Jill Craig reports from Nairobi.
The race between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga is projected to be tight. Some argue the candidates haven't stopped campaigning since the last election in 2013 that also pitted them against each other.
So there's a sense in which the elections have occupied the collective national consciousness of the Kenyan citizen and the voter. So it's a big deal.
But there is more than the presidency on the ballot. Research analyst Tom Wolfe believes that the 47 county races are generating at least as much buzz as the presidential contest. Definitely more so than in 2013, he says.
But many Kenyans, and we've seen this in our polling data, did not fully understand or appreciate just how much power or responsibility was being devolved from the center to the regions through the counties. So if you go and travel around the counties now, you will see as much, if not more, campaign activity that's associated directly for the contest for governor as there is for the presidency.
The organization of the polls has been a source of tension for more than a year, sparking opposition protests and several court battles. Complicating matters is the recent killing of the Electoral Commission's technology chief, Chris Msando, whose autopsy results show he was tortured and strangled. Msando was responsible for the electronic voter identification and vote transmission systems.
There's every possibility of people tying that passing on to the elections and to the possibility that there could be foul play. Remember, we are not saying that there's definitively anything like that, but the context opens up space for that kind of speculation.
And against the backdrop of the election season, Kenyans are still suffering from problems resulting from a regional drought emergency, like food insecurity and high food prices.
There's a lot of serious challenges facing the people of this country, so I'm hoping for a strong outcome for with elected politicians who will take their job seriously and really perform for the people who are electing them.
As campaigning wrapped up, youth took to the streets of Eldoret to march for peace. Kenya's Rift Valley region was the epicenter of the post-election violence in 2007 and 2008 that killed more than 1,000 people and displaced over 500,000. Kenyans hope these elections will be violence-free. Jill Craig, VOA News, Nairobi.
Now joining us live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya with more election news is Africa 54's Vincent Makori. Good evening, Vincent.
Good evening, Esther.
Now, Vincent, there are reports that there are more heightened tensions in Kenya just hours before the polls. What more can you tell us?
Well, I think it's very clear how much tension there is, how much anxiety and fear. When you look at what happened over the weekend, yesterday on Sunday, thousands, if not perhaps hundreds of thousands and millions of people across the country flocked churches and places of worship to petition God for a peaceful election. Looking back at 2007, you can tell that the nation was traumatized by the events of that time. The violence that killed over 1,300 people has led many to worry so much about tomorrow's elections that are just a few hours away that they feel that only God can guarantee them the peace and security that they really want to see them maintained in this country the day after tomorrow.
Now, Vincent, the social media as well as mainstream media in Kenya is abuzz with all kinds of news, and there are also reports of fake news as well. How does one tell between what is real and what is fake?
It's been confusing. In fact, there has been calls from the government that people have to make sure, and particularly the mainstream media, not to report on things that are coming from sources that are not clear, which end up being fake news by people who may have an appearance of being like some real reliable newspapers or some kind of television network. And so because of that, there's a lot of confusion. I mean, there have been reports all over the place, perhaps to kind of indicate what's happening behind the scenes. Some reports, though, are real, but it's the way they are presented by the media houses. For example, there's a report today in the newspaper that police in the lakeside city of Kisumu received many first aid items, including hundreds of body bags. Now, body bags, of course, to many mean that there's an expectation of hundreds of people dying. But the police are saying, well, this is just preparedness for whatever can happen. Just they're stocking the necessities for an emergency, just like the Red Cross would do. But such kind of things go to social media, and the people just focus on the body bags and therefore conclude that there is a plan to kill hundreds and hundreds of people in places like Kisumu. And this kind of reporting, this kind of information, when it keeps doing its rounds and many people don't have the background, it can create a lot of fear.
Well, given such reports, Vincent, just hours before the polls open, how well prepared are the Kenyan authorities to handle any sort of crisis that may occur?
In fact, just today, a few hours before the polls, the acting cabinet secretary for the internal security, Dr. Matiang'i, assured the nation that the security authorities are the security officials are actually ready and prepared to make sure there is peace throughout the electioneering, or rather the voting process. The police chief said that there are over 150,000 security agents will be around polling stations all around the country. That is the biggest, the largest number of security agents to be deployed during an election, more than double what was witnessed 2013. So that tells you how prepared they are, but what they anticipate. The security operators themselves seem to be anticipating some trouble.
Now, thank you so much, Vincent. Africa 54's Vincent Makori reporting live via Skype from Nairobi. Kenyans in the diaspora are keeping a close eye on the election. Those living outside the continent will not be able to cast their vote on Tuesday. But that did not stop a small group of demonstrators from gathering in front of the Kenyan embassy in Washington Friday. They were protesting against the killing of Electoral Commission official Chris Msando. The protesters called for a free, fair and credible election. They urged authorities to ensure Kenyans can go to the polls Tuesday without fear of violence or vote rigging.
So many people have been killed mysteriously. We are tired of these killings. We are saying stop this rigging, stop these killings. We don't want them anymore.
Kenyans are tired. They want the basic need like ugali back on their table. And with this election coming up, if they vote the right person back into the office, Kenyans are going to have their ugali back on the table.
If the voting system is taken away from the public, then what do they have? The public has a right to choose who their leader is. Whoever they chose to be their leader should be the person that leads. But at this time, Kenyans have expressed their need for change.
Now to Rwanda, where President Paul Kagame has won a third term as president with nearly 99% of the votes from Friday's election. More than 6.6 million votes were cast for the incumbent president and just over 80,000 cast for both opposition candidates. Turnout was about 96%. At the national headquarters of Kagame's Rwandan Patriotic Front political party Friday, thousands of political leaders, supporters and donors were cheering, singing and dancing as the election returns were coming in district by district. Rwandan television showed what it says were live pictures of Kagame making a speech. A 2015 constitutional referendum approved by 98% of voters could allow Kagame to remain in power until 2034. Opposition presidential candidate Frank Habineza of the Green Party told VOA that some of his party's observers had been denied access to polling stations, but after informing the National Election Commission, 95% of them were permitted to monitor the voting process. The United States is the world's top refugee resettlement country. More refugees have resettled in the western state of California, more than any other state over the past 7 years, according to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees data. VOA's Paul Ndiho, along with Solomon Sewanja and cameraman Godfrey Bardi from our VOA partner NBS station in Uganda, recently traveled to San Diego, where former refugees are giving back to the community that once helped them.
The United States admits tens of thousands of refugees each year, fueled by strife around the world. Despite President Donald Trump's temporary travel ban, the United States still remains a top destination. El Cajon City in San Diego County, California, has become a hub for such resettlement. Many agencies support new refugees, but one of the most important is the Alliance for African Assistance. Founded by Walter Lam over 20 years ago.
We bring refugees to start their new life here from all over the world.
Walter Lam knows firsthand what it's like. He arrived in the United States from Uganda more than 30 years ago. So far, his organization has resettled refugees from more than 20 countries.
One key thing that we know about refugees that are coming in here, all of them coming in here, if you talk of those that have children, they want their children to go to school. They want their children not to go through the suffering they went through.
In June, President Trump applauded the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to allow some of his travel restrictions take effect.
We were authorized this year to resettle 950 refugees.
Wow, that's a big number.
950 refugees here in San Diego. And as of now, to date, we have resettled only 422.
Another refugee giving back is Zainabu Danso, who fled a conflict in her native country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Zainabu and family members lived in a Ugandan refugee camp. And in 2015, they were resettled in El Cajon. Zainabu started as a volunteer case manager at the Alliance for African Assistance.
What we do when they get here in the U.S., if they don't know English, that's the first thing I have to do, enroll them in an English class so that they can at least improve their English.
For Zainabu, she says helping refugees is not without its challenges.
The most hardest thing for refugees, I want to say it's a language, because they tend to come here with completely zero English or little English, and the fact that they can't even get a job if they don't have the English here.
El Cajon is home to some 60,000 recent immigrants from Iraq and other parts of Africa alone. My colleague Solomon Selwanja from our partner NBS TV in Kampala asked Chief Jeff Davis about community policing.
It's incumbent upon us, I feel, as the police department, to try to reach out to the refugee committee or to community and ask them what their needs are, to educate them on what law enforcement can provide, the services, when to ask for help from us, and what we can do.
But the city has had its share of racial turbulence, especially after the fatal shooting in September 2016 of Alfred Alango, an armed and distraught Ugandan refugee shot by an El Cajon police officer. Prosecutors said that the shooting was justified, but Chief Davis remains optimistic about immigrants and refugees.
We are both learning. The refugees that come over are learning our customs, but it's important that we learn their customs as well.
Refugees have built new lives, homes and communities in towns and cities in all the 50 states. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, 2 tons of seized ivory are crushed in New York City to protest illegal trade. Stay with us.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
The United Nations says as many as 100 elephants are being killed every day for their tusks. China, the biggest market for poachers, recently announced it will end its ivory trade this year. The United States implemented a near-total ban on the commercial trade of African elephant ivory in 2016. In New York last week, conservation groups gathered to destroy some of the merchandise that came from illegal ivory trade. Here's VOA's Faith Lapidus.
Over the past century, elephant populations in the wild have plummeted from millions to about 500,000, all because of ivory.
You see this piece here in front of us, the top, this one piece here. 5 juvenile elephants were killed to make that small piece. Today, we are going to crush approximately 100 elephants. That is the number of elephants that die approximately every day in Africa.
This is literally millions of dollars worth of confiscated ivory, and the main reason that the groups say elephants are being killed every day.
A 2-year period from 2010 to 2012, 100,000 elephants were slaughtered so that someone could have something like this in their living room. It disgusts me. Who said it before? Commissioner, you said it. It's disgusting.
All the ivory being crushed was seized in undercover investigations that brought in nearly 3 tons of illegal carvings and jewelry. But there is some reason to be hopeful. The U.S. and China have committed to ending the trade, and New York has passed anti-ivory laws because it is one of the largest entry points for illegal ivory. The organizers of this event say they're trying to send a simple message.
To say to the world just in case you are contemplating buying ivory and you're not sure of the legality of it, don't buy it.
The organizers say they're fighting elephant extinction and want to make sure that carved ivory isn't going to be the only thing that remains of these iconic animals. For writer Kevin Enochs, I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on an official trip to the Philippines, Thailand and Malaysia to discuss U.S. economic and security cooperation with those nations. But North Korea's nuclear arms program remains one of the top issues on his agenda, especially after the UN Security Council recently imposed the toughest sanctions yet on North Korea for its continued testing of nuclear missiles. VOA's Latsa Hook reports.
The United States cheered China's support of the tough new sanctions that ban North Korean exports of coal, iron, lead and fish. So far, China has been reluctant to penalize its communist neighbor, but in Manila on Sunday, the Chinese foreign minister signaled a change of attitude.
We, of course, talked about Korean Peninsula's nuclear issue and that the UN Security Council just passed another resolution against North Korea early this morning. Both sides reaffirmed that we must fully and comprehensively implement this new Security Council resolution.
China has been calling for talks to secure permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula, but so far negotiations have produced no results, and North Korea has made significant progress in developing nuclear arms. Last month, Pyongyang tested 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles, saying one of them could reach the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump has asked for China's help to rein in Pyongyang, but has signaled that a military option is possible. Bruce Bennett, a defense researcher at the Rand Corporation, says China is determined to prevent a major military confrontation on the Korean Peninsula.
Any kind of major conflict outbreak would see Chinese intervention in the north. And then we would have to be very careful not to wind up in a major war with China.
Bennett, who spoke to VOA via Skype, said a better strategy for the United States would be to undermine the authority of North Korea's dynastic leader Kim Jong-un at home by pointing out his weaknesses.
For example, Xi Jinping, the leader of China, has had 8 summit meetings with the South Korean president, but has had none with Kim Jong-un, clearly suggesting that he thinks Kim Jong-un is a lightweight and really not important.
The new sanctions would strip North Korea of 1/3 of its export earnings, an estimated $3 billion per year. If fully implemented, they could curb Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Could trendy tiny houses be the answer for Germany's refugee housing problem? We'll be right back. And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Researchers from MIT Media Lab have taken wearable tech to another level by developing jewelry designed with small robots that can roam freely around your body. The robot consists of models connected to magnetic wheels on top and underneath the fabric, which allows it to change orientation. The robots can form various shapes and designs when used as jewelry. Currently, the robots are designed to be palm-sized, but researchers say they will be resized to the point that they can be seamlessly integrated into existing body ornamentation. And finally, a pin-sized project with big ambitions. These so-called tiny houses are the latest innovation in emergency housing. Popularized in the U.S. after Hurricane Katrina left a desperate need for quick and cheap accommodations, a trend has come to Germany as it deals with a different crisis. One architect picked up his tools after seeing a line of asylum seekers lining up to register in Berlin. The team envisions entire communities built this way, complete with libraries, cafes and startups. Rents could be as low as €100 a month for a one-room apartment of 10 square meters with a corner kitchen to cater for low-income locals priced out of an increasingly expensive property market. And that's what's trending today. Now, the art of beadwork goes back centuries with beaded collars in ancient Egypt, decorative baskets in Ethiopia, and on necklaces worn by some Native American tribes. In Baltimore, Maryland, American Joy Scott continues the art form by creating elaborate beaded pieces that often focus on social and political injustices. VOA's Deborah Block shows us her exquisite collection.
Joy Scott is creating a piece of art, one bead at a time.
My first bead teacher was my mother, and I think I learned it around 5 years old. Beadwork is a very calming, meditative form.
At her home in Baltimore, Maryland, Scott's studio is full of all kinds of beads and other materials she incorporates into her artwork, like metal, glass, buttons, and photos.
My style is that I possibly improvisational, and I'm so antsy, I'm so itchy that I won't allow myself to be locked in one form for very long.
Scott does not follow any specific plan, instead improvising as she crafts her pieces. She learned this peyote stitch from a Native American to produce multi-dimensional necklaces and large-scale wall hangings. This wall hanging is about Harriet Tubman, an African-American abolitionist who helped free slaves.
I really like the idea that I can defy the conventions of making really, really large work with the peyote stitch and it being something that I'm building as I go along.
Scott's artwork often highlights racism as well as sexism and stereotypes.
Around the world, many times people who are brown and black use bleach on the skin to lighten themselves because they're told that it's more beautiful or it's more beneficial when you go get a job, or you're more attractive to that guy you want.
Scott draws her inspiration from countries she has visited. She says her travels around the world made her think about the difficulties of indigenous people under colonization.
This is more about a voyager, about a trip of someone who's taking those routes. So he's going to Africa and he's going to Central and South America and who he sees on the road.
Scott's work has drawn numerous accolades and is in museum collections around the world. And she's not yet finished.
I keep learning new things. I invent new things. I play with new things.
Deborah Block, VOA News, Baltimore.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune into VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A plate is a dish that you put your food on.
Have a lot on your plate.
Hey Anna, I'm having a party this weekend. You should come.
I wish I could, but my weekend is really busy. I'm baking a wedding cake, writing my article, teaching 2 classes, and oh, my parents are visiting.
Wow, you have a lot on